This is the video for Part 2 of Chapter 2 in your Gateways textbook. Make sure you finished Video 1 before moving on to Video 2. Video 2 starts on page 23, The Question of American Independence. Have a pen, pencil, or highlighter ready so you can mark the text as we go through the reading. The Question of American Independence. Even after the outbreak of fighting, most colonists still wanted to remain as British subjects. Many of them had relatives in Great Britain. Others traded goods with Britain. Most saw themselves as loyal subjects of the king who were resisting the unfair policies of his ministers. On July 6, 1775, the Continental Congress issued a Declaration of Necessity of taking up arms. The purpose of this document was to explain why the colonists were resisting the British government. The declaration contained a long list of colonial grievances, but it emphasized that the colonists were not seeking independence. We have not raised armies with ambitious designs of separating from Great Britain and establishing independent states. 2 days later, the Continental Congress sent a petition to the King of Great Britain. The colonists asked the king for reconciliation and peace. King George III refused to receive the colonists' petition. Instead, he told Parliament that the colonies were in open rebellion. The king accused the colonists of planning to separate from Britain. Parliament passed an act prohibiting all trade with the colonists until the rebellion was crushed. The king declared the rebellious colonists to be outside of his scope of protection. All American ships, ports, and sailors became subject to capture and forfeit. So basically, at first the Americans weren't trying to leave Great Britain. They were just upset with what was going on. So they sent him a letter saying, we're not trying to separate, we're not trying to leave, we just don't agree with what you're doing. He took the letter, threw it in the trash, and said that the American colonists were trying to rebel. So at that point, he then started capturing all American ships, refusing to trade, and causing a lot of more problems for the Americans. Back to the reading. The king also sent more troops to America to fight the colonists. His forces include foreign mercenaries, which are hired soldiers, underline or highlight that, from Germany. These steps greatly infuriated the colonists. In 1776 of January, Thomas Paine published his pamphlet, Common Sense, as you learned in the last chapter. Paine argued that the colonists received little benefit from their connection with Great Britain, and Paine urged the colonists to seek independence. I want you to underline or highlight that entire paragraph, from in January 1776 all the way down to seeking independence on the next column over. So, Common Sense, remember the short book, the pamphlet written by Thomas Paine, was all about why America should just break up with Great Britain and start their own thing. In March 1776, General Washington and his troops drove the British out of Boston. Washington then moved his army to New York City. However, with the help of their fleet of ships, the British were able to land troops on nearby Long Island. Washington lost battles on Long Island and in New York City that summer and fall. Washington retreated across the Delaware River, but was able to defeat the British forces in December 1776 at the Battle of Trenton. Most colonists now felt that Britain had abused them. They disliked British taxes placed on them without their consent. Even more, they resented the use of armed force. More and more colonists agreed with Thomas Paine that they should end their connection with Great Britain. They wanted to free themselves from British rule. Many colonists also believed that they could not obtain allies, which are countries that agree to act together. Underline or highlight that. In Europe, so long as they remained subjects of the British king. Only by becoming independent could they ever hope to conclude alliances with foreign powers like France and Spain. They needed the help of these foreign powers to win the Revolutionary War. The Second Continental Congress began debating the question of American independence early in 1776. Circle or highlight that. John Adams, a lawyer from Massachusetts, was the strongest voice for independence. I want you to underline or highlight that and put a little star next to it. Adams persuaded many of the other delegates to vote in favor of separating from England. Page 24. In June 1776, Richard Henry Lee, a Virginian, introduced a resolution proposing independence. Resolved that the United Colonies are, and for the right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. A special committee of 5 members was formed to write a declaration explaining and justifying this decision to other colonists and to the rest of the world. A young Virginian, Thomas Jefferson, was the main author of the first draft of the Declaration. Underline or highlight that. Thomas Jefferson was the main author of the first draft of the Declaration. And then I want you to put a star next to it. 2 other members of the committee were John Adams and Benjamin Franklin. Jefferson wrote the first draft of the Declaration using parts of other documents he had written earlier for Virginia and the Continental Congress. The Declaration was later revised by the committee and then by the Continental Congress itself. So, Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, along with 4 other guys in the committee. So it was 5 guys in the committee, but Jefferson was the one who wrote it. They kind of threw in their ideas. Once they wrote it, they brought it back to the Continental Congress for everyone to look at it and then decide if they're going to send it to the king or not. You can go ahead and put a large X through the active citizen question, because we will not be doing this one. The Declaration of Independence. You probably have already heard of the Declaration of Independence. It was signed on July 4th, still our national holiday. Every year we celebrate the signing of the Declaration with parades, speeches, and fireworks. But what makes this document so very special to Americans? The Declaration of Independence actually accomplished 5 things. 1. It declared American independence. Underline or highlight that. It boldly stated that the colonies were no longer part of the British Empire and that the former colonists were no longer subjects of the king. So pretty much, we're not part of Great Britain, we're not listening to the king anymore. Number 2. It proclaimed a theory of government based on natural law and the protection of individual rights. Underline or highlight that sentence. So it said we're leaving the king and we're going to create a government that protects people's rights and is run by natural law. Number 3. It listed the grievances of the colonists against King George III and the British government. Underline or highlight the word grievances, and then I want you to, somewhere in the area around the text, I want you to write complaints with a line going from grievances over to complaints. A grievance is a complaint. So when you put a list of grievances, you're putting a list of all the things they were complaining about. Number 4. It justified the conduct of the colonists, both to their fellow countrymen and to the rest of the world. And number 5. It announced the arrival of the United States as an independent and equal member of the international community. Underline or highlight that. Able to wage war and make alliances. This cleared the way for former colonies to conclude alliances with France and Spain. So it's pretty much saying we are no longer part of England, we are now the United States of America.
Ooh, there's gonna be fireworks on the 4th of July. Red, white, and blue fireworks like diamonds in the sky. We're gonna shoot the entire works on fireworks that really show, oh yeah, we declared our liberty 200 years ago. In 1776, there were fireworks too. The original colonists, you know their tempers blew. Like Thomas Paine once wrote, it's only common sense that if a government won't give you your basic rights, you better get another government. And though some people tried to fight it, well, a committee was formed to write it. Benjamin Franklin, Philip Livingston, John Adams, Roger Sherman, Thomas Jefferson, they got it done. The Declaration, the Declaration of Independence in 1776. The Continental Congress said that we were free. Said we had the right of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness. Ooh, we're When England heard the news, they blew their stack. But the colonists lit the fuse, there'd be no turning back. They'd had enough of injustice now, but even if it really hurts, oh yeah, if you don't give us our freedom now, you're gonna see some fireworks. And on the 4th of July they signed it, and 56 names underlined it. And now to honor those first 13 states, we turn the sky into a birthday cake. They got it done. The Declaration of Independence in 1776. Continental Congress said that we were free. Said we had the right of life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness.
We hold these truths to be self-evident,
that all men are created equal,
that they are endowed by their Creator
with certain unalienable rights,
that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
And if there's one thing that makes me happy, then you know that it's there's gonna be fireworks.
Page 25. It can be difficult to understand a document that was written more than 200 years ago, but the Declaration of Independence has been so influential both in the United States and other countries that it is important to read some of this original document for yourself. 1. You will see the first paragraph of the Declaration states that it sometimes becomes necessary for people to end ties that once joined them to another people. When they do, they should explain their reason for doing so and to the rest of the world. So what that means is the first paragraph is saying, it's giving the reasoning. This is why we're leaving, and we just want to make sure everyone's on the same page and they understand. Number 2. The next section may be the most famous part of the Declaration. It sets forth the American theory of government. This theory is based on the belief in natural rights and John Locke's social contract. Underline or highlight that. It begins by stating that all people enjoy certain unalienable rights under natural law. These are God-given rights that cannot be taken away. Among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. 3. The Declaration next explains that people create governments to protect these rights. When a government acts to destroy these rights, its citizens have the right to end that government and create a new one. The Declaration recognizes that people should not change their government lightly. Disagreement with a few government decisions does not justify changing the entire system of government. But when there has been a long pattern of abuses, showing that the government has become despotic, which is oppressive, and dictatorial, which means like a dictator, then the people clearly have the right to change their government. Number 4. Such has been the case, the Declaration argues, for the American colonists. The British government has committed repeated injuries against them. The Declaration lists many of the specific abuses. These include, and now it's going to list some of the grievances or some of the complaints: refusing to approve necessary laws, imposing taxes without colonist consent, quartering troops in colonist homes, making judges dependent on the king's will, sending royal officials and colonists to be tried in Britain instead of on the colonies, and suspending or dissolving colonial legislators. The Declaration works up the most serious grievances at the very end of the list. The king has cut off their trade, he has made war on the colonists, he has hired foreign mercenaries against them, he has ordered the burning down of towns, and he has even stirred up neighboring American Indians to attack them. The list of grievances is the longest part of the Declaration. The final paragraphs of the Declaration explain that the colonists have tried to settle their disagreements with Great Britain peacefully, but all their attempts have failed. The time therefore has come for the colonists to declare their independence. The last paragraph of the Declaration actually contains the wording of Richard Henry Lee's famous resolution. The former colonies are all the right should be free and independent states. The colonists no longer consider themselves to be subjects of the king, and they claim the right to wage war and to make alliances on their own behalf. So basically, the Declaration of Independence was like a long breakup letter to Great Britain. It starts out in the first paragraph, and it says that sometimes it's necessary for people to break up or to separate. Then the next part, it kind of goes over what their idea of a good relationship would be with the government, which would mean people having rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. After that, it then goes down and goes over the type of government they don't want. And then they list all the things that Great Britain did to upset them. And finally they say, so now we're leaving you. So basically, the Declaration of Independence was just a very long, well-written letter from the colonists in America being sent to Great Britain saying we are no longer going to be part of your country. Once you finish that, you need to complete the rest of the worksheets you were given on day 1